If you feel like you should be eating better, but you just don't have time during the day to think it all through, and if carbohydrates confuse you, you're worried they might be making you tired, brain foggy, or throwing off your hormones, then this episode is for you. We are diving into how carbohydrates, when chosen and used intentionally, can actually support your energy, hormone balance, and mental clarity. I'll show you how to take the stress out of food choices, nourish your body naturally, and bring calm to your plate, even on your busiest days. But first, every week I'm going to be reading a review, and this week's was submitted by Samantha E., who said, "This podcast should be a staple in your wellness routine. Maria is so knowledgeable and offers a grounded, compassionate approach to holistic health, blending practical tips with deeper mind, body, spirit insight." Oh, I love it so much. I have so been enjoying reading all of your reviews, so thank you so much, Samantha. I hope you love today's episode. Are you tired of feeling overwhelmed by health advice, struggling to stay consistent, and craving more ease in your diet and calm in your mind? Then you are in the right place, my friend. Welcome to the Health Habit Podcast. I'm Maria, a nature-loving herbalist, science-obsessed nutrition therapy practitioner, and your guide to holistic healing. If you're ready for simple wellness solutions, nutrition tips, and mindset shifts to help you feel energized, fulfilled, and in control of your health, then brew up some tea or crack open a kombucha, and let's get into it. Did you know that I have a weekly email newsletter that provides you with even more holistic wellness tips and insights? Well, you do now. If you'd like to join my community of empowered, health-focused women, and if you're a dude, don't worry, I love you too. Go to thehealthhabit.net/newsletter. The link will be in the show notes. Now, I grew up in an Italian family, so bread and pasta has always been a staple in my life. It's been associated with so much love and joy, but over the years of learning about nutrition, I have reevaluated my relationship to carbs a lot. But the last thing I want for you all is to get caught up in the drama and confusion surrounding them. So today we are simplifying it all. Carbohydrates are one of the three main nutrients used by the body. These are your macromolecules. So when you hear people talk about counting their macros, they're referring to carbohydrates, fat, and protein. All three are crucial for health and for body function. Carbohydrates in particular are the main source of energy for the body. So it is really important to consume carbohydrates, but nowadays with all of the food processing and the refinement that happens, not all carbohydrates are created equal. And this is when the confusion and all the drama surrounding carbohydrates comes into play. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, we need to know three terms that you're going to hear when people are talking about carbohydrates, and that's simple carbs, complex carbs, and refined carbs. Simple carbohydrates are monosaccharides and disaccharides. Monosaccharides are the smallest form of carbohydrates. These are the things that cannot be broken down unless you're using strong chemical agents. The main monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, ribose, mannose, xylose, and galactose. And then disaccharides are two monosaccharides combined together. Main ones being lactose and sucrose. Sucrose is your table sugar. The next term is complex carbohydrates. These are your longer chains of sugars or carbohydrates because ultimately all carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which is a sugar and the primary energy source of the body. Don't worry, we're going to get into details of everything soon enough. So complex carbohydrates are your oligosaccharides, which have 3 to 10 sugar units. things like raffinose and other stuff that you're probably never going to hear. All of these are digested solely by the bacteria in our gut. Our digestive enzymes, which is how we break down all the food we eat, does not break down oligosaccharides. The next form of complex carbohydrates is your polysaccharides. These are chains of like 10 plus sugar units. So things like starch, glycogen, which is the main storage form of carbohydrates in the body, literally just your main energy storage in the body, period. Last major polysaccharide that you'll hear is cellulose. Again, this one is only digested by the bacteria in our microbiome or our gut. And the last term is refined carbohydrates. These are carbs that have gone through extra processing to remove the bran, the germ, and whenever you process food, you are going to lose nutrients as well. So the refining process takes away the fiber that is generally connected to carbohydrates and removes a lot of the vitamins and minerals. So in refined products, you're going to see nutrients being added back in to try to offset the essentially damage that happens during the refinement process. Examples of refined carbs are going to be like your white bread, bagels, pastas, white rice, breakfast cereals, crackers, that kind of thing. This is where the drama of carbohydrates begins. When we consume a refined carbohydrate, so a processed carb product, we aren't getting the fiber and the nutrients that are normally attached to carbohydrates. So our body is able to break it down and then absorb the sugars from the carbohydrates much faster, which causes a more rapid spike in blood sugar. And this causes a major issue in the body because having high blood sugar levels is very toxic to the system. So it becomes top priority to get the blood sugar into the cells or stored as energy, so it's not just hanging out circulating in the blood. This is where insulin comes into play. Insulin is a hormone secreted by the pancreas, and it tells the body, hey, there's sugar hanging around in the blood, you need to take that up and do something with it. So if this happens often, and we are having frequent major spikes in blood sugar, our bodies are producing a lot of insulin, and as a response, our body can be like, hold up, we're getting this call often. Maybe I should stop listening because surely I don't need to be taking up that much glucose. This is where insulin resistance comes up, right? So our body is resisting certain signals because it's getting the signals so frequently that it really doesn't think that it's important anymore. And with that, we can potentially develop diabetes and other metabolic disorders that cause a lot of health implications later on. So what can we do? The first thing is just to make sure that we're not heavily relying on processed carbohydrates in our day-to-day life. Making simple swaps like rice or pasta to quinoa can be really, really helpful. Trying to rely a little bit more predominantly on vegetables instead of those more refined products. But if we are going to consume refined carbohydrates, because we do not need to completely nix them in order to be healthy, we just need to be aware of how they affect our body so we can respond accordingly. So if we are going to have refined carbohydrates, we want to make sure that we're also getting fiber, protein, fat. That way there's a lot happening in the stomach. There's more nutrients, there's more going on, and thus our body has to spend more time breaking down, digesting, and this means that the absorption happens over a longer period of time, so we don't see those sudden spikes in blood sugar, and thus we have a more normal amount of insulin being produced by the pancreas, and just generally more balance in the system. When we don't do this, this is when we have that tiredness after meals, that like up and down in our energy where we feel like we need to have a coffee or like a sweet treat, but then we're super tired afterwards. That is literally your body producing a bunch of insulin, everything taking up glucose at the same time, and now we have low blood sugar levels and our body's like, oh my god, what's going on? It's not fun. It's a roller coaster ride. That's what we want to avoid, and we do it by making sure that we are always getting a balance of carbohydrates, fiber, protein, and fat in every single meal. So what would this look like? If we're going to make a pasta dish, add a couple vegetables and then drizzle high quality oil like olive oil. Or if you listen to episode 1, maybe we're grabbing a walnut oil and we're drizzling that over our meals. By doing this, we are supporting our overall health without even really adjusting our diet or lifestyle much. So that's my number 1 suggestion for you all, is just to make sure that we are getting fat, protein, and fiber in every single meal, especially if we know that we're having something that is like processed carbohydrate heavy. What are some high fiber add-ons? So things that we can like drizzle over top of our food or like have on the side or as like a dessert afterwards. Psyllium husk, perfect example. It's a powder. You can make it like an oatmeal if you want, or you can drizzle it over things. Chia seeds, nuts, berries, flaxseed. You can freshly grind flax seeds and then just put that powder right over top of your meals. You're not going to taste it, but it's providing you a lot of extra fiber, which is going to help normalize that blood sugar response in the body. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but it is important to note that the effect a carbohydrate has on our blood sugar levels is called the glycemic response. And there are 2 terms that were created to compare the glycemic response in different foods. The first is glycemic index. This is a number out of 100. And the second is glycemic load, which takes into account the portion size. So if this is something that you want to get more into, look up those terms. Some examples of foods that are high fiber and low glycemic, which is what we want to focus on for optimal health, is going to be lentils, beans, and other legumes, berries, a lot of starchy vegetables like carrots, sweet potato, parsnips, and squash. As far as what things really to avoid, the highest glycemic index foods are going to be your sugary drinks. And that's not just soda. Also, a lot of juices have a lot of added sugar. And again, if we're having these high sugar things without the protein, the fat, the fiber, it's just not going to be great for optimum health. And I will say, blood sugar regulation is really, really important for people that are trying to balance hormone levels. So just be aware of that. If you are trying to get higher energy levels, balanced hormones, you're going to want to make sure that you're getting healthy sources of carbs. So we're focusing on those whole food forms, fruits, vegetables, legumes, things like quinoa, all those nutrient-dense, high-fiber foods. There's another component to carbohydrates that's not often talked about, but it's so important, and that is its correlation to brain health. The brain is a very hungry organ. It is always working, even while we sleep, so there's very high energy demands, and the brain relies almost exclusively on glucose for energy. And I say almost because it can use galactose, but that's predominantly in infancy because there's a lot of galactose in breast milk. And what's unfortunate is the brain cannot produce its own glucose like the rest of the body can. It has some capacity to store glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose, but it only is able to store enough for roughly a day. So it needs its glucose to come from our diet and from the rest of the body. When we have a diet that's high in refined carbs and we're seeing those spikes in blood sugar, there's not much time for it to get to the body because the body is literally shuttling it straight into the cells because our body cannot have elevated blood sugar for a long time without having serious implications. So we need to provide the brain slowly and gradually with glucose so that it can function properly. And the way that we're going to do this is, like we've been talking about, focusing on low glycemic, high fiber carbohydrate sources like those sweet potatoes and berries, but also eating foods that are high in glucose specifically. And these are not the foods you would expect them to be. One of the best sources is spring onions. Like, glucose in onions? What? You wouldn't expect it. It doesn't taste sweet, but it has a lot of glucose. Some other awesome sources are like apricots, turnips, red beets, honey, and grapes. So if we notice that we're having brain fog and it's just becoming really hard to focus on a task, take a quick pause and grab a healthy carbohydrate, specifically ones that are high in glucose, like grapes, or maybe have some raisins, or like a red beet salad, a tablespoon of honey and some tea, whatever you want to do. That is going to increase your ability to be productive and have higher energy, mood, all of that great and wonderful stuff. When we're talking about glucose and brain function, when we have those quick spikes of blood sugar, most of that glucose and those nutrients are getting shuttled to the cells. So there's not time for the glucose to pass the blood-brain barrier into the brain. So we're getting all the negative aspects of blood sugar without the benefit of supporting our brain. I also want to take a moment to talk about ketones, because you have probably heard of the keto diet, which is a very low carb diet. The body and the brain can run on ketones for energy, but this is a secondary pathway. It, for most people, should not be the primary source of energy, and for the brain, it just does not thrive on ketones. It needs glucose. So we want to provide glucose, and we want to have some carbs. If we're talking like a bare minimum, at least 50 grams a day. If you have less than 50 grams of carbs a day, you are potentially putting the brain at risk, which we obviously don't want to do. And it is really important to make sure we're regulating blood sugar levels, because if you have high blood sugar levels, even ones that are like tolerable to the body, can be damaging for the brain. So we want to maintain a very balanced amount of sugars within the body. As a holistic provider, I rarely focus on weight loss, so I almost completely forgot to talk about why carbohydrates are associated with weight gain. Carbs get a bad rep for causing you to gain weight because of those rapid blood sugar spikes. When this happens, the body has to get rid of the sugar in the blood quickly, so all of that excess sugar gets immediately absorbed by the cells, which then have to store it as glycogen. Once those glycogen stores are full, the rest needs to be stored as fat or used by the cell, but the cell can only use so much. So this is why when we frequently have a surplus of sugar in the blood, we end up having to store more fat to get rid of that excess sugar, and that is going to cause weight gain. So carbohydrates alone are not going to cause you to gain weight. You don't need to worry about that unless you are eating a lot of processed, refined carbohydrates and you're eating them without fat and protein in the meal. So overall, to balance the entire body, we want to make sure that we are selecting healthy sources. So these are our whole food things like the sweet potato, the quinoa, and trying to minimize more of the processed carbohydrate sources. And then when we are having carbohydrate heavy meals, make sure that we're also including fats, proteins, and being mindful of the amount of fiber that we're having. And that pretty much concludes our discussion. Like, holy information. This is everything you need to know about carbs just in one 25-minute episode. If I was going to give you homework for this episode, it's to go to the store, buy some berries and some nuts, and just experiment with having them more throughout the day, especially before or after carb-heavy meals. Now, if you want to continue building a more holistic lifestyle, then join me and all the other amazing humans who are actively learning how to confidently support themselves naturally. Pull up the internet, go to thehealthhabit.net/newsletter, and let's get connected, baby. Hello, beautiful human. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something new and felt inspired or blessed. If so, please take a moment to share this with a friend who's also working to improve their health and wellness. And leave me an honest review on Apple Podcasts. It lights me up to know that this podcast is helping you. Now, go get some sunshine on your skin, and I will meet you back here on Saturday morning for another episode. Bye!